What color?
He's purple. He's purple.
Show's over.
I didn't even see it. It looked black.
What's up, everybody?
You are.
So, we're going to talk about the endocrine system this week. What is the endocrine system? Hormones, right? What else? What else about it? Glands. So the endocrine system is a system inside of our body. That was so funny, Shaq. Huh? You made me laugh the whole time. It's a system inside of your body that is kind of like a slower nervous system. All right? And a really good analogy about this is looking at an email versus Facebook. Okay? When you email somebody, you have a really direct line of contact to a very specific person. That's what our nervous system is for. This is a neuron, beautiful neuron. That's exactly what it looks like.
Amazing.
So the way the nervous system works in your body is it's very quick. Okay? We don't even know how it actually fully works, how it fully functions, right? But really it's an energetic electrical system. So what happens is input comes in, it creates this electrical charge, and this is called the synapse. And at the end, these things called neurotransmitters are released from the nerve into this space, and some of them connect to the target cell. So it sends a specific email to one cell. And what happens is because when it connects to that receptor, it causes all these chain reactions to happen inside of the cell, which go to the DNA. And remember, they open up certain genes, and that cell will start to perform certain functions. And as a result, you get a short-term, quick response. Make sense, everybody? So when you need to respond quickly, your nervous system is firing. But we have this thing called homeostasis. What's homeostasis mean? Balance. We have perfect balance inside our body at all times. The endocrine system is what's maintaining that. And you don't need quick responses for that. You need slow and steady responses for that. So the endocrine system is a series of not electrical, but chemical messengers. What do we call those chemicals? That's what a hormone is. A hormone is a chemical messenger. So here's an endocrine cell. We have endocrine glands. Can anyone name an endocrine gland?
Thyroid.
Pituitary, thyroid, right? So the thyroid is a gland. It's essentially just a whole bunch of thyroid cells. And these cells are specialized to produce hormones. And what they do is they produce these chemicals called hormones. They dump them out into the blood system, and they kind of send it out. It's like your Facebook status. You put a whole thing out there. You say, hey, who wants to go out this Friday night? Right? You're not specific with it. You're just sending it out. And there are certain people who are going to grab onto that and say, hey, I want to come. Hey, I want to come. Make sense? It's kind of the same thing. You're putting all these messages out, and then a couple cells will be open to receiving that message. So it's a blast message that a couple receive. And the same thing. These chemicals come here, and the same thing happens. They'll have a reaction, cause that DNA to change. It'll cause certain genes to be expressed. But in this, you have a long-term, a slow response. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Difference between the nervous system and the endocrine system. We're going to get into it, but essentially your nervous system also controls your endocrine system as well. Now there are two types of hormones as well. You have some that are water soluble, and then you have some that are fat soluble. Here's the difference between the two. Water soluble. Anyone know what your cell is made out of, the wall of your cell? It's called a bilipid layer. So what does bi mean? Lipid means what?
Fat.
So do fat and water like each other?
No.
They don't, right? So if something's water soluble, it can't get into your cell. So what they do is they have these things called receptors. on the outside. And what will happen is these water-soluble hormones will come in and they'll connect to a receptor, and that receptor will then kind of trigger a chain reaction and cause all these other chemicals inside of you to react and affect the DNA. Something that is fat-soluble, which means it can dissolve right through the layer into the cell, means that hormone, let's say it's a square-shaped hormone, will go right through into the cell and directly go in and affect the DNA itself. Okay, that's something like T3, thyroid hormone.
Vitamin D.
What's that?
Vitamin D.
Vitamin D, I'm assuming, yes. Yeah, it's definitely fat soluble, okay? Same thing. Make sense, everybody?
Well, then what's water soluble? Like, what is there?
Vitamin C.
Sodium, chloride, potassium.
There you go. Okay, also things like glucagon and insulin, things like that. So also think about it this way. What's your blood made out of? Water or fat? Water, right? So here's the other difference too. When something is water soluble, so these hormones over here, like glucagon, because it's water soluble, it'll just dissolve, it'll just go right into your blood system, and it's fine. Remember, fat doesn't like water. So if something's fat soluble, it doesn't just float around in your bloodstream. It needs a taxi cab to drive it around. So those are what proteins are. So you guys have heard of albumin. You might have had a blood test. You got something called albumin on it. It's a protein. It's a taxi cab. It binds to something and carries it away. Okay? Have you guys had a blood test before for your thyroid? And you have something called like T3 or T4. But then you have something called free T3 and free T4. Do you guys know the difference between the two? So T3 is fat soluble. So it means it always has a taxi cab with it. When it lets go of the taxi cab, when it leaves the cab, now it's active. Now it's free from its taxi cab. So that's free T3 versus T3.
So then it's not fat soluble anymore?
What's that? So
When it's free.
it's fat soluble, but it means it's kind of bound. So what will happen, for example, if you have T4 on the outside, you'll have a taxi cab bound to it. That's called T4. If it wants to get into the cell, it can't while it's in the taxi cab. It's got to get out and get shuttled in. So what'll happen is it'll pop free, and what do we call that? That's free T4, and then it'll go into the cell. It'll transform into T3. Let's call that a triangle like that. Now it's T3. That'll pick up a taxi cab and drive it around the cell, inside of the cell. Okay? That's the difference. Which one is active is free T3. Okay? So, this is how let's kind of do a basic workup of how it works. And let's talk about blood sugar. You got these little crystals inside of you called glucose. That's your blood sugar. So, what happens when you go for a run and you burn up all your sugar inside your blood? So, all of a sudden, this starts to go down. If you don't have a response, what happens to you?
You don't feel good.
Yeah, what happens if your blood sugar gets too low?
Faint.
Yeah, what is your body using sugar for?
Energy.
Energy. So if all of a sudden it starts to go low, you're in big trouble. So your body has to respond. So what happens is your nervous system, this is why the nervous system is in control of all of it. Your nervous system will sense that your sugar in your blood is low. So what it'll do is it'll send a response to the pancreas, and your pancreas will produce a very important hormone called glucagon. So this hormone will go out into your bloodstream, it'll swirl around, and it'll find these cells in your liver, right? And what they'll tell that liver cell to do is break up the sugar storage that we call glycogen. You guys follow me?
Mm-hmm.
And it'll release the blood sugar. And then sugar gets back released into the blood system again, and it's happy. So what's the nerve system tell the pancreas cell?
Stops producing.
We're good. Hormone gets shut off. Life is good. That's the endocrine system. Pretty simple, right? Okay. So let's look over here at my beautiful drawing over there. Pretty bad, okay? And let's talk about the main hormones in your body and the main glands. You have a very, very important gland up here. It's actually probably the most or second most important gland of your entire nervous system. It's called your hypothalamus. Okay, anyone know what the hypothalamus does?
It's the master.
It's pretty much the master of all of them. So I want you guys to think about this right now. Your nervous system is tuned in with every single cell of your body. It's knowing your blood sugar, it's knowing your blood pressure, it's knowing pretty much every function you can ever imagine. It's sending all of that information to this one sensor in your brain called your hypothalamus. And your hypothalamus from there pretty much regulates every hormone inside your entire body. Okay? So, your hypothalamus does two things. You have these two glands called your posterior pituitary and your anterior pituitary. And they work together. So, what happens is all this information from your nervous system is going up the spinal cord, past the top bone of your neck. I'll draw my atlas on there, you gotta draw that. Past that top bone and feeding information into the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is producing some pretty important hormones on itself. Something called anti-diuretic hormone. What is diarrhea? Scoop on poop. What is diarrhea?
Watery.
Watery. So if something's a diuretic, what does that do? Gets water out of you. So what does an anti-diuretic hormone do? Stops it. So the hypothalamus will produce this thing called anti-diuretic hormone. And it also produces something called oxytocin. Anyone know what oxytocin is?
Love drugs.
It's the love hormone. When you feel love, it's oxytocin that's doing that. I like you here, Five. Well, you help.
He paid me.
And what happens is these drugs, these hormones, these chemicals are made in the hypothalamus, and they come down through a nerve into your posterior pituitary, and these things are just there to release ADH and oxytocin. So the posterior pituitary doesn't really make anything. It's just pretty much the release point for all the chemicals made in the hypothalamus. So remember this diagram. Anti-diuretic hormone gets released from here into your blood system, down your body, and it goes to your kidneys. And it tells your kidneys, hey, stop releasing water, we need to retain water. Your nervous system sensing that. When you have too much water, and the nervous system comes back up here, and then it stops releasing ADH. Okay? Same with oxytocin. Now your anterior pituitary is a little bit different. Your anterior pituitary doesn't have a nerve connection, it's got a blood connection with the hypothalamus. And they're intimately related because the hypothalamus also regulates these things called releasing hormones. Regulating hormones. Meaning this. Who was here for my thyroid talk? Okay, where does it start? It starts in the hypothalamus and it makes one drug. Anyone know what it's called?
Thyroid stimulating hormone.
Yeah, it'll make something called TSH. Thyroid stimulating hormone. I'm sorry, even before that.
No?
Thyroid releasing hormone. That's here, which goes to the anterior pituitary, and the anterior pituitary makes something called TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. But it starts with the hypothalamus. You guys follow me? Is this getting too complicated? Everyone's like, no, not at all. So put it this way, your nervous system right now is sensing how much T3, thyroid hormone, is in your body. When it's low, what does your body have to do? Has to make more. So what happens is all this nervous input goes up to the hypothalamus and it produces a hormone called thyroid releasing hormone, which then gets released to your anterior pituitary. This hormone tells your anterior pituitary to make thyroid stimulating hormone. What do you think thyroid stimulating hormone does? So then this thing will come out into your blood system just like this, and it'll float around and your thyroid will pick it up. And once it gets that message, it tells that cell, hey, start producing this thing called T4. Okay, and so on. And that's how the endocrine system works. Okay? So what else does the anterior pituitary make? We'll just put other hormones up there.
Prolactin.
Yeah. Now, Fatwa, why do you know this?
Because I'm a midwife.
What does prolactin do?
Helps you make milk.
Helps you lactate, right? So, prolactin. Anyone heard of growth hormone?
Yeah.
What does growth hormone do for your body?
Heals you.
Yeah, it makes your cells grow. Okay? So if you have a tumor on your anterior pituitary, remember Andre the Giant, for example, somebody like that, right? They're producing too much growth hormone. They just keep growing and growing and growing, okay, until it's dangerously big. And then you have something called gonadotropin hormones, which are the hormones which release all of your sexual hormones as well, from your testes and your ovaries. Okay? Anything else? Oh, an adrenal cortico. What's adreno mean? Adrenal glands. Cortico. What does cortico mean? Cortisol. Okay? So it all starts up there in the brain and they get released. Let's go down with some other things. So then you have your thyroid. Where's your thyroid located? In your throat, right? What's it look like?
Butterfly.
It's like a butterfly or an H, right? And what does your thyroid hormones produce? Or what hormones are produced in your thyroid?
T2, T3.
T4, mostly T4, something called T3. And there's one other one. You guys know what it's called? No? By the way, what does T4 and T3 do in the body? It regulates your metabolism. Think of these like the gas pedals. What's metabolism? Just throw these words out there.
Energy.
It's the way your body processes.
How much energy you're using. So if you have a high metabolism, what does that mean?
Active.
So all that sugar in your blood, your cells are taking it up quickly, and it's kind of like a car, like a gas pedal on a car, and you're revving that thing up, okay? So when your T3 levels are high, you're burning through energy very quickly. If your T3 levels are low, what does that mean?
You're hypo.
Hypo, you're really slow, you're not burning energy, so what's your body have to do with that energy? It has to store it, okay? So that's what T4 and T3 do. And then you have something else called calcitonin. What is calcitonin? What do you think it regulates? Calcium in your blood. If your calcium's too high in your blood, your body will release this thing called calcitonin. Guys, so many people get blood tests done and they're looking at this stuff and they're saying like, oh, their calcium levels are high or low. What's the answer? They're just taking more or less calcium. Most of the time it's not an intake issue. It's how our body's communicating with itself. It's always a communication issue. And then you have something called the parathyroid, which is literally, if you're looking behind us, it's these little glands on the side of the thyroid, and it produces something called parathyroid hormone, PTH. It does the opposite of calcitonin. So if calcitonin takes calcium out of the blood, what do you think PTH does? Spits it in. So they're working together. Did you guys know your heart is actually an endocrine gland? Did you guys know that? Your heart is producing a hormone all the time called natriuretic peptide. And what this does is this actually slows down or lowers your blood pressure. So if your blood pressure is too high, your hypothalamus is feeling that, sending electrical messages down to your heart, and your heart starts producing this hormone called natriuretic peptide to bring your blood pressure down.
So for people that have high blood pressure, is that something that's not working properly?
Hold your thought. This is going to get more interesting because we're going to ask some cool questions over here and get into more of the philosophy behind it. Hold it, okay? Pancreas, what's the pancreas produce?
Insulin.
So you got your stomach, and then behind it is this thing called your pancreas, and your pancreas is producing two main hormones. We talked about one earlier over here, glucagon, which takes sugar from your liver and puts it into your bloodstream when you need more energy. So what's the opposite of that? What's the opposite hormone? Insulin. And what does insulin do? Takes sugar from the blood and packs it back into your liver and into your cells. So they work opposites. Into your liver, into the cells of your body, so your body can uptake that. And then you have your adrenals. Where do the adrenals sit? So you have your kidneys, And then on top of that, you have these little organs called adrenals. Ad means above, renal means kidney. Okay? And if you look at that, it's like a little triangle. You have two parts to your adrenal gland. You have the outside and the inside. Anyone know what the outside is called? It's called the Adrenal Cortex. And the cortex produces cortisol.
Cortisol.
What does cortisol do?
Stress. Manages your stress.
So what does it do in you? Why would someone get a cortisone shot? What is, I'm sorry, what did you guys say? Yeah, an anti-inflammatory. Your body produces its own anti-inflammatory medication inside of you called cortisol. We don't need to add any extra to it. It actually interferes with the body's own innate healing process. You guys follow? Then you also have the medulla, which is the center, and this produces something else that you guys are all very familiar with. When you're really scared, what happens? What does your body release? Adrenaline, right? Or epinephrine, it's called as well. So you have adrenaline. Okay, and then you have the testes and the ovaries, and there's even more than this. Your stomach's actually considered a gland that produces some certain hormones as well. Your small intestine. So there's a lot, but these are the most common. And then your testes and ovaries, what do they produce?
Sex hormones.
Testosterone,
Estrogen.
estrogen, progesterone, things like that, okay? Most famous ones. We all good with that?
Okay.
So let's talk about this now. First question I want you guys to understand, or we go into, is we're talking about blood sugar. Let's say we're talking about blood sugar and it gets low. How do we know what low blood sugar is?
Nobody knows.
Well, you feel it in your body.
So part of it is this. Thank you for saying that. If we are connected within ourselves, we can actually feel this. There's actually this really intelligent Indian doctor out there who works with diabetic patients, and he talks about blood sugar. And one of the things he talks about is what should our blood sugar be today? Our fasting blood sugar. When you go to the doctor, anyone know what it says on a test? Under 100. He talks about 30 years ago, it was 140.
Right.
And then they brought it down with really not much information down to 120. Now it's at 100. Right? But what he's saying is this. First of all, nobody knows what it should be. This is coming down not because of science. This is coming down because of money.
That's right.
Because of pharmaceutical companies. They want this number lower and lower so more and more people get diagnosed. He was talking about in the country of India, when this happened, literally overnight, it was something like a few million people who weren't diabetic the night before were now diabetic.
Right.
And now need medication. Now they're needing urgent care.
Yeah.
Okay? That's how great these tests are. No one knows what your blood sugar should be, but he goes on to talk about you can feel when you have high blood sugar. You get certain signs and symptoms, right? You can actually feel it. And I've known people. I know a woman, for example, I take care of. Her blood sugar has been 200. She eats super clean. She feels amazing. She doesn't have any symptoms at all. And every time they put her on any kind of medication, she feels absolutely horrible. And she does fast, she does everything, and her numbers stay right there, and she feels perfectly healthy. Is that somebody who has high blood sugar? Who knows, right? What should your blood pressure be? So B.J. Palmer, the founder of this work, called it the law of par. The law of par is this. Who's a golfer here? I'm not a golfer. Law of par means this. So what's par in a golf course? So par means this. If you have like a par 4, it means you should be able to get in 4 shots, right?
Right.
So we have a par of our system. This is what he's calling homeostasis. There's a par for my blood pressure, right? There's a perfect number that blood pressure should be.
Yes, but you have to say for your blood pressure.
So here's the deal. I don't know what it is, and there's no way you can know what it is. You start to get into the subjectivity of our healthcare system. What knows what our blood pressure should be? There's an infinite wisdom within us that's sensing all of this and letting us know this. So think about this. This is what we neglect in all the science. When my blood sugar gets too low, what is sensing that it's too low? You guys ever think about that?
No.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right?
Your hypothalamus, right? Or
That's just the brain. That's just an organ. That's just cells. What's saying that's too low?
The way you
Yeah.
feel.
And well, I'm saying the infinite wisdom within us, right? Because it might be when my blood sugar gets below maybe to 60, that might be for me. For somebody else, it might be 50. So what's sensing that and saying, okay, now it's time to act? There's a higher intelligence that's running our body that knows what's perfect for all of us. And this is what we forget. This is how amazing the human body is. We can't just get a blood test and say, oh, these numbers are low, I must have an issue. Okay? If I have a blockage, let's say the atlas, the top bone of my neck is out of place and it's choking the arteries going to my brain. Okay? I'm not getting blood to my brain because there's a blockage. What should my blood pressure do? It should go high. Okay? Do I want it to come down? No. Now, what if there was no blockage and my blood pressure starts to go up? There's something sensing that it's going up and it's going to regulate it. Now that there's a blockage, that number should go higher, shouldn't it? What's doing all of that change inside of us? There's an infinite wisdom within us that's controlling all of our health. It never messes up. It knows what every number should be. So this is not as easy as just being like, oh, these numbers are low, take this, make them higher. These numbers are high, take this, make them lower. It's understanding if your numbers are going high or low, there's always a cause to it. It's not just doing that for no reason. Next question is this: how do the glands of your body stay healthy? So when your thyroid isn't producing T3 or T4 anymore, or it's going down, what do we do in our country? What's the answer? Right? The question is never, why isn't it producing that? How do I get these glands healthy again? Now, number one, we have to understand this. Do you guys mind if I erase this over here? Beautiful neurons here. So there was a chiropractor named Reggie Gold. So there was this chiropractor named Reggie Gold. He used to have a whole talk, literally an hour-long talk, on this thing called the chemistry of life. And what he said was this: everything in your body is chemistry. Everything. What we were just talking about. When you have a scared reaction, it's just adrenaline that's going off. When you want your body to store sugar, right? Insulin's going. It's all chemicals. What produces chemicals in your body? Glands do. This is what glands do. Okay? So the glands produce chemicals. What tells the glands what to produce?
Your brains.
Your nervous system is sensing it all, right? And it's sensing it through electrical energy. What's telling your nerves what to do? The infinite wisdom. Remember, a brainstem, a dead person has a brainstem, right? Doesn't do much, right? There's an infinite wisdom that is talking to your brainstem, sending messages through nerves, through glands, and those glands are creating the perfect amount of chemicals. Think about our society. What do we do for our healthcare? What do we measure? What's a blood test, guys? Chemicals. If there's something wrong with a chemical, what should you do? Now, what we do, same example. If your thyroid chemicals are off, what do? They supplement you with chemicals. Let's follow the chain. If something's wrong with your chemicals, where should you look? Let's look at the glands. If we keep these healthy, they're going to produce the perfect amount of chemicals. So what keeps these glands healthy? Number one, what gives it life? The nerves do. Do we ever check the nerves?
They normally don't.
No, right? And what tells the nerves to do? Infinite wisdom. Is this ever going to mess up? Can you mess up the infinite wisdom inside your body? No. So where's the first place that you should look to keep your glands healthy?
Upper cervical.
Right? It's a domino effect. It's cause versus effect. You guys follow this?
Mm-hmm.
So literally, we are stuck here in this world. This is all we look at is effect. Trace it back, trace it back. In order to keep these glands healthy, you need a very healthy nerve connection. Your nervous system is what's controlling all of it. It's what's sensing every single hormone in your body right now. Okay? But you also need two other things. I want you guys to think of a house. In the house, you have three things going in. You have clean water going in, you have sewage coming out, and then you have an electrical grid system that's actually hooked up to it as well. Clean water going into the cells, there's a what? If you have a cell, you have clean water running by it, what is that? Your blood system. So you need clean blood. You need to make sure you're not poisoning yourself. You need to put in things that are alkaline in nature, that are healthy in nature. Okay? We all know what that is. We talk about it every single week. It's the same stuff. What's the sewage coming out? Anyone know what your body, when it makes chemicals or when it's got waste, what does it do with that waste? Kicks it out, and what's it kick it into? Your lymphatic system. So your lymphatic system, you have stuff going into it, you have waste coming out of it, and then the nerves coming into it is the electrical grid that's going into it. It's the three things that you need for a healthy cell. Now here's the thing, most of our diet is full of animal product, full of chemical, full of medication. You're poisoning your blood, full of acids, full of pus. That stuff comes in, your body has to use that stuff to make energy. How much more waste are you making? A lot more waste. That waste has to go inside your lymphatic system, and then you get a backup of your lymphatic system. Imagine if you have a septic tank and it backs up into your house. Not too fun, right? This is what we do from the time we're born, and then all of a sudden we're eating junk food, eating horrible stuff, taking medication, and we're doing this for 20, 30, 40 years. This lymphatic system backs up into your cells, and your cells can no longer kick its waste out. And your cells become literally a toxic wasteland. Right? And then we talk about subluxation, when this top bone misaligns. Guys, remember, when we're talking about this, every single thing that's going on inside of your body has to go from an electrical nerve up past the top bone of your neck to that hypothalamus. Every bit of information goes to the top bone of your neck, the weakest part of you. So when that bone is misaligned, putting pressure on nerve fibers inside of here, you are no longer sensing your body properly. How can you regulate your hormones if you can't sense what's going on? You can't, right? So in order to have healthy glands, what do you need? You need a clean diet. You need to make sure that you are getting rid of waste. So if you've had a bad diet and a lot of chemicals, you need to start detoxing fast and cleaning out your system. And you need to make sure there's no blockage, that atlas is clean. And then every single cell of your body is going to be healthy. These glands are going to be healthy. Life is good. Okay, that's my advice, to have a healthy endocrine system. And then finally, what happens if you use a hormone over and over and over again? So, what's that? You get desensitized, and you have to realize making a hormone is a production. So remember, we talk about your genes. So inside of your cells, you have this thing called your DNA, which is a bundle of genes, which are blueprints. Literally, when something comes in, let's say you want to make insulin, you're going inside of the cell and you're telling this DNA, hey, you need to make this hormone. So you literally have to have resources to make these hormones. So I want you to realize, when you keep using something over and over and over again, you deplete the materials to make the hormone. So we all understand this. When we're stressed all the time, what happens to our adrenals? We get something called adrenal fatigue. Why does that happen? Use up all the cortisol over and over and over again. Use up all the adrenaline over and over again. Your body can't keep up with the demand, and then you don't have any adrenaline left over. So what is something like type 2 diabetes? You don't know what type 2 diabetes is?
Acquired diabetes.
Right?
Not born with it.
So what happens when you keep dumping sugar into your blood, or a whole bunch of fats into your blood, so there's all this sugar inside of there?
insulin?
Yeah, your body has to keep making insulin over and over and over and over and over. And after a while, your pancreas gets so run down and so depleted, it doesn't really make it anymore. Okay? What's the best way to get your insulin back? You fast. You fast. When you fast, what's happening? You're giving your whole body a break, and your body starts to store up again material, and it can make it just like that again. So now think about this with something like T3. If you keep using metabolism over and over and over again because you're putting all this food in our bodies, and you're going into overdrive, eventually your thyroid says, whoa, I'm done, I'm spent. It's done. So how many hormones do we do this with? Over and over and over again. Does that make sense? If you do this with this hormone, which is lowering your blood pressure, so you're eating a whole bunch of fatty foods, and your blood is getting really fat and oily, and it needs more pressure, and it's getting too high, so your body keeps dumping out this natriuretic peptide over and over and over again. Pretty soon, you can't produce that hormone anymore. Okay? So this is the beauty of fasting and giving your body a break as well. Awesome. Does anyone have any questions about any of this stuff? It's kind of a weird talk. It's kind of a complicated system. Okay? No questions at all? Is it?
Such a good job.
How about that? It's a complicated system. Guys, next week's talk is going to be completely different. I think you guys are going to really like it. Healthy relationships, healthy sex. It's going to be a little spicy, maybe. I don't know. And then Saturday we have a breakfast talk as well. Thursday night last week, Laura did an excellent job. Who was here for that? It was awesome. Woo! It was really good. Next Thursday, Alex back there is going to be doing a talk on the power of thoughts too, just to keep you guys informed, okay?
What?
Power of thoughts, right?
Power of thoughts.
You want to talk just 2 minutes or a minute about what it's going to be about?
So yeah, it's going to be all in line with what Kevin's been talking about the infinite intelligence and diet and how your body works and connecting that to how you think. So for the most part, this infinite intelligence is working through your subconscious, but you can actually change what your subconscious is telling your body. So but it's not just with health and, it certainly is with health, but it's also with emotions and how your life shows up, and there'll be a little bit of law of attraction stuff in there.
Awesome.
Right in line with everything he's talking about.
It better be Alex. Guys, thank you so much for coming. Next Thursday. Not this Thursday, next Thursday, okay? Oh, Kellyanne has a painting class here tomorrow night, right?
Tomorrow night. Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Awesome.
Bridge into fall.
Bridge into fall. All right, hey, love you guys. Thank you so much.